B2 represents the client satisfaction across the 4 items that you look at or ask for.
Yeah, so I'll tell you how we calculated these and then speak to that, Madam Chair and Councilmember Boyce. So as to not skew the results, we created a score for each project because some of the projects might have 10 respondents, some might have 1 or 2, and so we didn't want those 10 to over skew the score. So each project that we have gets its individual score, and it's based on those 5 components. In looking at those 5 components in aggregate, there's a little shift towards some higher scores in timing and communication, and a little bit lower in recommendations, but nothing that really got my attention. Maybe 5 points or lower, and I can send you some of that detail. I have that in a spreadsheet if you need it.
Mr. Tetzel, thank you very much. That's fine. I just wondered if we're still kind of dragging around on the recommendations, but it sounds like that's comparable to all the other 4 components. So, thank you.
The annual report also includes some language around our mission and our vision. Nothing to really comment on here, but that's for the annual report.
Mr. Tetzel, I just want to say this is exactly what I'd hoped for when we imagined a fully functional audit team a couple of years ago. We've cleaned up old findings. I hope people are all pleased with that. We've got a feedback loop, a productive feedback loop, and that's really important. And about our working relationship as an internal audit group with clients around the enterprise. Are there any thoughts or questions from others? May I have a motion to receive and file the 2015 internal audit annual report? Great. Second? All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. The report will be received and staff will publish it. I'm also pleased that our last item under new business today is the 2016 audit plan. Part of our role as a committee is to review and approve a yearly audit plan that guides the work of our audit department through the rest of the year. So, Mr. Tetzel, could you go forward with what we will do this year?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The process to come to our audit plan was similar to last year. We conduct risk assessment meetings with departments and divisional leaders. We solicit information from council and from the mayor's office, and we just gather information from the work that we do and the experiences we have and the meetings that we have throughout the year. So it's it's a continual process, and I want to note that again, the audit plan is a point in time. We always try to stay as appraised as we can on emerging risks, and if something comes up that is more important or more pressing than something that's on the plan, we like to exercise our right to reprioritize and change that, and my job is to communicate that to the audit committee. If there's something that comes up that I don't agree with or that I would like the committee's opinion on, then I'll wait till the next meeting. Otherwise, we'll typically run it by the chair and make some of those changes as they occur. The 2015 plan changed dramatically, as was expected. We didn't get to all the departments before we put the plan out, so we met with Public Works and CPED over the summer, and those meetings drove some pretty significant changes in the plan. The 2016 audit plan consists of 14 projects. 4 of those are carryover projects from last year, and I'll talk about those as well. There's 8 audits, 5 consultations, and 1 program audit, and that program audit is the carryover from the prior year. So I'll go through the projects on the list, and then you can either interrupt or we can talk about questions at the end. These are in alphabetical order. They're not prioritized in order of risk or importance. But the 2016 ones are first, and then the carryover ones are the last 4, so they're not mixed in together. The first project is an audit of the accounts payable processes here, and the objective is to evaluate key processes and controls around payment timeliness, accuracy, and fraud. The next project is a civil rights contract compliance audit. And the objective of this audit is to review the processes and regulation in place for civil rights contracting requirements and review the execution consistency and accuracy of the respective processes. The third project is around IT projects management. This is a consultation, and the objective of this consultation is to determine if the city has adequate project management processes and tools to guide system implementations. I want to note here, right now we're experiencing a lot of system implementations at the city, rightfully so. The management of those projects doesn't solely lie on the IT department. Certain departments are all over the spectrum in how engaged they are in a project implementation, and so this isn't specifically focused on the IT PMO, although there'll be a core piece of this work. It'll include also the city department's participation in this. The next project on the list is a license plate reader pre-requirement review. This is a consultation. The police department uses the license plate reader software, and there's some legislation out there that it will require a biannual review of this. The first audit, or biannual audit, sorry. The first audit will be due in 2017, and so the police department wanted us to come in and look at that license plate reader program, and based on some of the language in that legislation, give the city an opinion of anything that they need to improve to prepare themselves for this audit. If the audit goes well and there aren't any recommendations, we'll probably look to post this as the first required audit of the system. So it'll be similar to what we would do in the next steps, but this is really a proactive approach to making sure that the controls and processes in place around this are adequate. The next project on the audit plan is on the Park and Rec Board. It's around worker safety, and this is an audit, and the objective of that is to determine if the Park and Rec Board has practices and procedures in place to both prevent injuries and adequately address injuries that do happen. The Park Board has done quite a bit of work around this as of late, and they've asked us to come in and help them get an understanding of how adequate those processes are, if anything needs to be altered based on that, and how well that's performing. Also identify any gaps in those practices as well. The next project on the plan is off-street parking operator, and this is an audit with an objective to evaluate the service level agreements and city and vendors' adherence to contractual requirements. As you all probably are aware of, in October of 2015, we continued to work under ABM to operate the off-street parking in the city. The contract is somewhat different than it has been in the past. This has been audited before by the prior audit team, but Public Works and the audit department agreed that it'd be good to look at this again under the new contractual terms and potentially a different scope than what was done in the past. The next project on the list is a PeopleSoft Finance Access Audit. Similar to the work that I presented first here in the meeting, we've done some pretty significant access testing on the HR PeopleSoft module. We want to do the same thing on the Finance PeopleSoft module. Part of that being that the city doesn't have an enterprise-wide approach to monitor system access. And so we're going to hit some of these big systems and then work with departments or divisions to see if we can improve our access monitoring within the city. The next project is PeopleSoft Web Portal Security. And this is an audit, and the objective to determine the adequacy of security controls for the PeopleSoft Web Portal. So if you'll remember, we talked about the HR access to PeopleSoft. There's a web portal for PeopleSoft Finance and PeopleSoft HR where an employee can access that system remotely, not through the federated network. And so we want to look at some of the security controls that we have on that web portal to make sure that they're adequate enough to prevent any malicious activity. The next project is a police body camera pre-requirement review. So similar to the license plate reader, right now there's pending legislation of a tri-annual audit of body camera processes around the data that's collected there. So as we get a better understanding of the language and where that's landing, the police department again asked us to come in similarly to the body camera pilot program consultation that we did last year, help them understand any gaps or opportunities that they have in adhering to the triannual audit requirements going forward. The last of the 20...
Just real quickly, Mr. Tetzel, in the audit plan, it was a cut and paste, and so it repeats the license plate reader down there. Maybe not on the PowerPoint, but in this bad boy.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Tetzel, in this one, just take, it's just it needs to clarify and that it's body cam.
Gotcha.
So, no big deal. Just, we don't want to publish it with that. That's all.
Yep, I'll fix that. Sorry about that. The last of the 2016 projects, Transportation Management Organization. This is an audit around third-party governance, which I'll talk about in my auditor update. In this audit, the objective will be looking into some grant compliance, but not limited to that. There's an organization called Move Minneapolis under the TMO that will be doing some audit work around. The last 4 projects I'll go through a little bit quicker because you've heard about them before. CPED loan lifecycle, we're in the fieldwork phase of that. It's a very large audit. I would anticipate that coming to the May Audit Committee meeting. ELMS, which is Enterprise Land Management System implementation. There's some sort of ad hoc consulting that we do on that. I think that is slated for an October 2016 implementation there. There's the NCR Neighborhood Programming and Support Program audit that we've outsourced. That should come to the March Audit Committee meeting. They're wrapping up some final pieces of that report. And lastly, Police Records Management System implementation. This was something that was on the plan for last year, but the bulk of the work will happen this year. They're in contract negotiations now, so we'll plug in a little bit later in the year to help the police department understand some of the configuration considerations they're making and just generally address some of the risks of such a large-scale system implementation that touches so many other systems within it. At that, I'd like to invite our IT auditors to come up and quickly just talk about the audit plan and the audit planning process.
Thank you. Before you do, Mr. Neal has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one quick question, Mr. Tetzel. Concerning the scope of the civil rights contract compliance audit, just a scoping question. It says review the execution, consistency, and accuracy of the respective processes. I take it the scope of your audit is just to look at how the contract is, the solicitation process and the award process. You're not following it all the way through to the end to see if what was contracted for was actually provided or not.
Madam Chair, Mr. Neal, correct. Yeah, it'll just focus on some of those requirements that the city has through the Civil Rights Department that they uphold there.
Thank you.
Thank you. You wanted to invite up Mr. Homestead to say a few words? Mr. Homestead.
Madam Chair, council members, my name is Tim Homestead. I work with Backbone Consultants. We provide the IT audit services for the city of Minneapolis. Just wanted to talk about how we completed the IT audit risk assessment in alignment and coordination with Will Tetzel and his team. We took the approach very similar to Will's operational audit staff, where we interviewed key leaders, key stakeholders, and key project managers to identify projects and scope for this year. We based the analysis on inherent risk, the project scope, the service impacts of the organization, as well as the previous audit date. And we used the framework that's based on the Government Accountability Office, Federal Information Systems Control framework. So based on that, we identified a list of primary projects to focus on throughout the year, as well as some additional secondary projects which didn't meet the criteria to fall into the primary projects based on either risk, resource availability, but as Will mentioned, based on emerging risk, additional items may be moved into the primary focus for the 2016 proposed audit strategy. Are there any questions related to the IT audit scope for this year?
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I did want to mention that although it's a challenge, we had a huge amount of potential projects for this year, so it really speaks volumes to how forthcoming department heads and divisional leaders were in our risk assessment process. There's still a really high demand for the services and the value that we can provide to the city. So the challenge being balancing what people ask for with what we independently think the city needs from an audit perspective. But that's a good problem to have from my standpoint.
Super. This is the end then of the presentation on the audit plan. Super. With acknowledgement, this is a guide and we're constantly assessing risks and there's a lot that you're looking at. May I have a motion to receive and file this 2016 annual audit plan? Super. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, and that report will be received, and I'll direct staff to publish it. I also have, from your earlier presentation, Mr. Tetzel, I want to make a staff direction in regards to the 2016 audit plan. Thank you for this audit plan. This plan and the items on it vary a lot in size and in scope. I like that most of them were ones that we were requested to do, not all of them. Some are on the leading edge of policy, like data privacy standards and the like. I think that's going to be really informative and help us to really stay on top of those things. Some is on all the flux of multiple IT system implementations going on, which we all feel the pain of around the enterprise and from our customer service standpoint, from the public that we serve. I really appreciate that in light of the human resources personnel file maintenance and audit report and some of the things that came up in that, I'd like to make a motion to direct staff that within the scope of the 2016 work plan, could you analyze the enterprise practices for employees that terminate employment with the city? Could you report back on this plan update, how that might fit into this 2016 plan at our next scheduled audit committee meeting? I'm curious what policy issues could be put in place given best practices research. I'm curious what are recommendations on methods that could help us drive a better accountability to be really diligent when an employee leaves the city, for us to be very specific. It seems like in part that accountability isn't really with HR, but it's with the individual departments, and that's hard to make consistent. But I know there's some things out there that we could do to make a pretty, to help drive accountability, to make an impact fairly quickly here. So I'd like to make that motion to try and incorporate an analysis of that within this year's audit plan. Could I have a second? Super. A motion on this. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Mr. Tetzel, you also have an update for us on previous motions. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as we typically handle, I want to use this time to update you on our progress to date. Right now we have 4 projects in motion, and I've spoken to these are the 4 that rolled over from 2015. We don't just stop working on something if the year rolls over and the audit plan rolls over, so we'll continue to see those projects to closure. The only one that's significant is the CPED loan audit. The rest of them are really winding down. You have asked in the past for an update on the state auditor findings. And what we do and what we've done here is we don't, I want to be clear on what's getting presented here. Audit does not go in and validate the remediation of the state auditor findings. Rather, we just corroborate with the finance department, specifically the controller, on their progress to date, and then keep you guys appraised of what that is. Happily, there's really just two things that are outstanding. One is around loan C documentation. That's going to require a system implementation, and so that's why you see an August of 2017 date. The MIN system, which they're currently using, is getting replaced, and it's something that we're helping them look at and helping IT gather some minimum requirements on in the work that we're doing. And the other one being the prompt payment of invoices. And they're continually working on that, I will say, but by June, I think we hope to see that finding drop off of the audit, or the state auditor's report. In meeting with AP in our risk assessment process, we got a better understanding of why we're seeing these late payments on the state auditor's report, or their opinion of it. And it's not that the invoice doesn't get to AP timely, it's that it doesn't get back. AP sends it out for approval and coding, that sometimes it doesn't get back to them in enough time for them to pay it. So they won't pay it until it's approved by the appropriate person in the city. And sometimes those approvals can take a while because either the invoice isn't clear and it gets potentially misrouted, or there's a lot of information that the person on there needs to check off to make sure that we are paying it. So we're going to look into that a little bit more in the AP work that we're doing in 2016. And then we're also looking into some of the language in that requirement. I think it's a 35-day requirement. According to AP, it should be 35 days based on a clean invoice. Sometimes we don't get a clean invoice. So making sure that when we get findings like this from the state, that those 2 dates they're comparing are from that clean invoice date, not just the invoice date that comes from a vendor. I mean, you could put any invoice that you wanted onto it. You could put it already a year past, and once we get it, it's already overdue. So hopefully that'll help out a little bit. So it feels like they're making great progress on these state auditor findings, which we're happy to see.
Yeah.
I mentioned before, but I'll bring it up again. There's 3 of the 24 findings from the prior audit team left open. We're currently working on those and getting traction on those. And the 2 audits from 2015 produced those 14 findings. Again, working with those departments and leaders on their remediation plans and dates, and we'll have, once we get that solidified, that'll be much more transparent to myself and the audit committee, and then we will stay appraised of the progress on those and report to you at each meeting. One of the things that I mentioned last year was this idea of third-party governance, and so I wanted to get back to it because we're solidifying this more and more in the audit department. I'll first explain what I mean by third-party governance. A third party could be a vendor, it could be a partner, a strategic partner, it could be a grant subrecipient, any entity that we contract with or work through to provide services or do something on behalf of the city. A theme just in the audit world in general has been emerging in the prior years around how organizations govern third parties and what levels of controls and processes they need to make sure that the higher risk areas that you have when you ask someone to do something on your behalf or procure things from other entities. And so we've done a few things here. One, we put together this illustration to help understand how we're going to approach this work. And if you remember in some of our earlier discussions, we talked about this 3 lines of defense, that internal audit model, 3 lines of defense. We take that same approach with third-party governance and trying to illustrate how or visualize what this looks like. So the first line of defense for the city is really the contract execution or the grant execution and that vendor risk management. This happens with the city employees who deal directly with these third parties. It usually lives in the departments. The second line of defense are functions of the enterprise that help facilitate that process. So contract management, finance management, grant management, IT security management, the city attorneys. So there's a lot of functions that happen within the city to help that first line of defense when they both arrange for a contract to be executed, but in the facilitation of the continual facilitation of that. Again, we see ourselves as that third line of defense, but differently from the models that you've seen before, not only do we plan on doing work around the first line of defense and the second line of defense, but we're going to get audit coverage with those third parties. And you've seen that in the 2016 audit plan, the TMO audit that we're doing. So we do want to make sure that we look at the landscape of our third parties and with the limited resources that we have, adequately address some of those high-risk areas. This will include auditing some third parties, but some of that work will be looking at what we do here in the city and how we manage that effectively.
Thank you. I just want to jump in here and say, this speaks to one of the audits, a fairly small audit on our 2016 work plan. It is important, and we have seen in the past when we've worked with partners that didn't have the kinds of checks and balances that we expect from a city relationship. While we only have a very limited bandwidth to do these, and we have a lot of small partners, organizations that we work with, as we should, it is important to put them on notice that they may be audited by our city's internal audit team. So thank you. This is an important aspect, and this is part of our total risk picture.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A few things that we're doing in this regard to third-party governance. We're building out some templates for departments to use so they can sort of plot their third parties and help get a visual understanding of where those high-risk ones are, where they should be focusing some of their activities. We're also developing some sort of core audit procedures. So if we're doing an audit of an area and it happens to be something where there's a third party involved, we can pull some of these standard procedures out and execute them where they make sense against some of this work and sort of get that coverage, push this theme through some of the work that we're already doing. So we're putting together some of those sort of standard audit procedures that we can plug and play into some of the audit work that we're going to pull off this year. And then accounts payable, the accounts payable audit on the audit plan is also, if you think about it, a second line of defense here in the third-party governance work. So we're going to look at them and get an understanding of some of how they're managing some of that third-party risk that they own from an accounts payable perspective. This is it's a big effort, and it'll roll out sort of slowly, but we want to start a little bit stronger this year and getting departments involved. We can't force anyone to, but if we give them tools that they'll hopefully use, we can help them understand how to use those better. And that in turn helps us understand where some of the bigger risk lies with some of these third parties.
Great. Questions or comments on this part? No? May I have a motion to receive and file the update from the internal auditor?
Can I do that?
Please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seconded? Second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it, and this report will be received and filed. The next item on our agenda is the performance review of our internal auditor, Will Tetzel. The committee will adjourn to room 321. That's the Weber Pond room. And for those on the dais, that's off to your right for that performance review. And we'll be looking to have a closed session on that. Thank you.